What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the Fantasy Slant, brought to you by Pro Football Focused. I am your host, Mike Tagliere. As we do every single week, we are here with our usual trio of co-hosts. We have Marianne Lee, Daniel Kelley, and Nathan Jahnke of PFF. We have so much to get into today, guys. It's the Waiver Wire show, and it's a really big one because now we're heading into Week 13. Whether you're in the playoffs, whether you're fighting for that final playoff spot, whatever the case may be, we're looking to add players now going into the stretch run, basically where it all matters. But before we get into that, I just wanted to ask you guys a real-life football question. I'm going to have each of you answer. Nathan, I'm going to start with you because you tracked this game last night. You watched every snap. Who would you rather have in real life right now? Say you're starting a franchise. Would you rather have Carson Wentz or would you rather have Jared Goff?
I'd go with Jared Goff based on everything I saw out of college. I know he hasn't played well to start with, but Carson Wentz hasn't been playing well recently. So just based on what I saw in college, Goff. All
right, Daniel, who you got?
Oh, same thing. I haven't been impressed by Wentz other than his first few weeks. So if I'm starting with, if those are my only two choices, it's Goff for me. I don't think you're wrong either way right now. I don't think we know enough to really say, but I would go with the number one pick.
All right, Brandon, is it a run of the board? Would you take Jared Goff as well?
Nope. Carson Wentz, no problem. Hands down.
You just like him because he's a Carson from the Dakotas.
He's a Carson from the Dakotas. No, but I just think that the way Philadelphia has set him up was to fail. I mean, there's nothing consistent about, their play calling, their weapons are terrible. When the best player on your team by a long shot is older than I am, and I'm not a young spring chicken, we got a problem. I just think that, I think that Jordan Matthews would be a fantastic wide receiver too on a team. Having him being the number one wide receiver in the slot has been troublesome at best. Now, he does have terrible rookie moments like that interception last night.
Yeah,
it was too bad because he was playing so well up until then, and then it was like, whoa, where were you even going with that? That was so high, it was bizarre. So, but Zach Ertz has been a huge disappointment. There are a ton of drops on this team. I don't know. I just think we haven't seen enough out of him, and I think he at least has some leadership skills and has made the best of a bad situation. Mm-hmm. But Jared Goff to me just kind of lacks poise and leadership. And I think those things you can't learn. I think that what Carson's missing, he can learn.
I understand what you're saying. That's, I guess, my one concern about Jared Goff is that he doesn't seem like he'd be a vocal enough leader, like a leader of men, whereas Carson Wentz seems like he's really trying to pull these guys together. Now, for me, I'd probably lean Wentz. I felt like coming out of the draft that he had more, ability, but he just had to bring it out. I do believe he was brought into a position to fail. The talent around him, the coaching staff, what they do on offense there, I don't believe in. So I think that he was set up to fail. I don't think a quarterback should start right out of college. I think that I like what the Rams actually did with Jared Goff. I know a lot of people have given them a lot of heat for it, but I actually prefer, if someone drafts a quarterback, I prefer him to sit on the bench for a couple weeks at least, just to take in the NFL game speed and what it is. So, but yeah, I just thought it was an interesting question to lead it off. So that's going to kind of start us off. So we always start talking about a couple streaming options at quarterback, and we're going to lightly touch on them today because there's so many names at running back, wide receiver, and tight end that we want to get to. So our options, obviously number one, and he's still somehow under 40% owned, is Colin Kaepernick. I don't think we need to talk too much about that. He's been fantastic. His floor is crazy high. But the next couple options, we're going to run through those real quick. Ryan Tannehill at Baltimore, and then we have Ryan Fitzpatrick at Indy. Daniel, I noticed that you have Ryan Fitzpatrick higher than the Ryan Tannehill, the other Ryan. So explain to us what makes you so high on Ryan Fitzpatrick this week versus Indy.
The versus Indy part is a big part of it. It's a garbage defense. It's a good offense. Fitzpatrick's going to have to throw to catch up, or keep up at least. Brandon Marshall looked better this past week than he has in some time. And along with that, Fitzpatrick looked a little better. They're playing the Patriots, who don't have the best front seven, so he wasn't getting pressured that much. Meanwhile, Tannehill, as Brandon has said so many times, is always there just to disappoint you eventually. And I think you looked it up several weeks ago that Tannehill does better in the tougher matchups and worse in the easier matchups, or at least more comparable than he should. And I think Tannehill is primed for a letdown coming up. So I'd much prefer Fitzpatrick this week.
I just think this is a weird week where Tannehill this is a matchup where he's going to have to throw. Like he hasn't thrown more than 34 pass attempts since way back in week 3, but I think this is a game against Baltimore where they're going to have to throw a lot more than they've wanted to. Just because Baltimore at home, they allow 2.7 yards per carry, which is just a ridiculous number. They're the best run defense in the league as far as I'm concerned. Nathan and Brandon, you guys both have Joe Flacco versus Miami at number 3. Brandon, why is Joe Flacco number 3? Why is he over Ryan Fitzpatrick and guys like Alex Smith?
Oh, man, these are the tough questions, right? I mean, I don't love really any of these people except for Colin Kaepernick by a long shot. I just think that he has a higher floor against Miami. I'm hoping that he does, although he's been really tragic as of late. But I don't know. To me, just Miami is a decent matchup for them. I think Miami's going to eventually get exposed. And I think this is the defense that's going to do it. I think that they've kind of been playing with house money recently, and I think this is the game. So I think that I'm banking on good field position and Flacco being able to make something happen in the red zone.
Yeah, no, it hurts that they're missing 3 offensive linemen and this and that. They need to get healthy for this game. That's what it comes down to. So, so in the order that we have them cumulatively among all of us, we have Kaepernick at number 1, we have Tannehill at number 2, number 3 is Fitzpatrick versus Indy, number 4 is Flacco. Then if you want to go deeper, you're talking about Carson Wentz at Cincy or Alex Smith at Atlanta. So those are obviously options that you're not going to want to use if you don't have to. But where we're going to spend a lot of our time is running back and wide receiver this week. Nathan, let's start with you. Your number 1 pickup at running back is different than all of ours. All of us have Kenneth Dixon atop ours, except you, actually, Brandon, you don't as well. But your number 1 pickup is Rex Burkhead. I know that he played a lot of snaps this week. Do you expect that to continue, or do you think this was a matter of – I know Jeremy Hill was dinged up for part of that game, so did a lot of it have to do with that? Do you think that he's taking on the Gio Bernard role? Like, what's going on with Rex Burkhead, and why is he worth a pickup over Kenneth Dixon?
Yeah, I think he's taking over the Giovanni Bernard role, so he'll see a lot of passing downs going forward. I could see him very well in some matchups playing over 50% of snaps because he's more of that receiving back. He looked fine the few times he was asked to run the ball last week. He only saw 2 targets, but I could see those targets getting picked up a little bit while he has that extended playing time. So he's really the only one out of this group that I could be fairly confident that at some point over these next few weeks he'll play over 50% of snaps.
That's a good point. And like when you're talking about snap counts and stuff like that, now my guy, Kenneth Dixon, the one I've been talking about for weeks and saying that, and we've had this argument on this show. If you guys have been here, you know that. We've had the argument about Kenneth Dixon, whether or not he'll ever be fantasy relevant just because they're sharing the snaps. But this past week, his snap percentage has continued to rise. This week, it was up to 45. He played 8 more snaps than Terrence West did. He outperformed him again. Over the last 4 weeks, Kenneth Dixon has broken 15 tackles on 45 touches. He is PFF's number 1 elusive running back over that time. I think that Baltimore wants him to have the job. I think they've slowly worked him in, and down the stretch run, it seems like he might be set up for some success. Brandon, let's see, Daniel, you have Alfred Morris at number 2. I think that I'm right there with you. I love Alfred Morris as a handcuff. I think this is the time of the year where you do pick up handcuffs. Explain to people why they should grab Alfred Morris off the waiver wire.
Well, you say I have his ranking at number 2. This comes back to the old question of what do you need out of the waiver wire? If you need someone to start this week, obviously not going with Morris. But if you're feeling pretty good and you're just looking ahead toward the playoffs, handcuffs are exactly what you want because there's no trading left. So you get to the playoffs, if somebody goes down, all you have is whoever's on your bench. And if you're stashing someone like Capri Bibbs or Denard Robinson, other guys on our list, they don't have much upside. If Ezekiel Elliott goes down, Alfred Morris is a top 7 running back at worst. He is at least decent running back with the best offensive line in the league going for him. So if you're in a situation where you know you're making the playoffs and all you need to do is solidify your roster, the Alfred Morrises, the Andre Ellingtons, the D'Angelo Williams, the guys who we have a fair amount of confidence will be strong if their starter goes down are the guys you want to be stashing.
Yeah. So Brandon another name. So outside of Alfred Morris, obviously if Zeke goes down, that automatically is like an RB1. You just plug and play into your lineups. Is Mike Gillislee one of those players as well, where if somebody doesn't need a player right now, that they could just stash him on their bench?
Yeah, he absolutely is. And I just wanted to say one more thing about Alfred Morris. Go check your settings. More people than you think play Week 17 championships, and Alfred Morris could win you your championship. I don't think they're going to start Ezekiel Elliott in Week 17. That would be crazy sauce. They're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to probably already have a bye solidified. I think Alfred Morris could actually win you your league in Week 17 if that is the case for you. I think that Mike Gillislee is in that same kind of category of obvious handcuff to LaShawn McCoy, who has had issues. Again, though, Rex Ryan does really weird things with Mike Gillislee. He almost does better when LaShawn McCoy's on the field. It's very weird. That's the only hesitation that I have about Mike Gillislee, is that for whatever reason, the coaching staff just doesn't seem to play him in the same way that they played LaShawn McCoy ever. We have no evidence of that. So I'm concerned, but I do think that, it's handcuff time of year, and that's who it is.
All right, so now that we've gotten some of those handcuffs that we've talked about, Nathan appears to be on a different track. He actually has Denard Robinson over both Alfred Morris and Mike Gillislee. So Nathan, talk to us. Let us know why Denard Robinson.
It's only due to the situation in Jacksonville right now, where both of the top two running backs have been hurting. I haven't heard the very latest, so definitely keep an eye on what their situation is. But if one of the two is out, then Robinson's going to see a significant amount of snaps, where some of these other players, we are just looking at them only in the situation where the top running back goes down, where in Jacksonville, we're already at the situation where both of the top two running backs have been hurting recently. So this is more if you could need a running back to start versus having the best possible option if someone does get hurt.
Yeah. No, I mean that's the thing is, like, I actually have TJ Yeldon on one team, and I debated dropping him this week because Tyreek Hill is on the waiver wire in that league. And
Holy
I was
mackerel, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was shocked to find out. No. So oftentimes I overlook my waiver wires. Like sometimes I don't even put waiver claims in because I'm busy just doing research or whatever the case may be. Where I'm sitting here debating, I'm like, do I drop a starting running back for Tyreek Hill, a guy that plays 60% of the snaps? Do I do that? And I've come to the conclusion that, I probably should. I was trying to find someone else, so I didn't drop a starting running back. But the Jaguars' running back position just worries me as a whole. Nobody really has performed there. I know Chris Ivory was off to a good start, but he's also faltered in really good matchups this year. One of my favorite handcuffs that it seems like nobody else agrees with me is Charkandrick West. Just because when he's in a workhorse role, he tends to do a lot better in games where he sees 18 or more touches. So if something were to happen to Spencer Ware, I do think Charkandrick West would be in must-start territory. I think he'd be locked in for 15 to 20 touches a week with Niall Davis, apparently, because he's a thing again. But Daniel, you're the highest on Capri Bibbs. You're not extremely high on him, but is there something about Capri Bibbs that makes you want to stash him?
No. The only people I ranked him ahead of were Charkandrick West, who, there's just, I don't see the upside that I guess you see. I think it'd be almost a timeshare with him and Niall Davis if Ware goes down. And Rex Burkhead, who Nathan went through all the positives, but let's just say I don't see those positives. I think it's just a matter of there's not a lot to excite you on the running back waiver wire right now. So Bibbs has a little bit of big playability that we haven't seen out of Burkhead's, sure, but no, there's not much exciting there.
I know what you mean about Burkhead. My concerns on him is that, Gio Bernard, even in his role, he wasn't offering you much consistency at the running back position. So even if he walked into that role, he's not getting goal line carries. He will catch some passes, even though Jeremy Hill had, I think it was a career high in receptions this week with 6 of them. But if you guys at the running back position, if we were to do a cumulative of our rankings here, we have Kenneth Dixon as the number 1 pickup, Alfred Morris as number 2, Rex Burkhead as number 3, Mike Gillislee 4, Charles Sims actually at 5. Let's take a second to talk about Charles Sims. Daniel, you're highest on him. Why are you so high on Charles Sims?
It's all, if he comes back, he's Charles Sims. We've seen what he can do. He's a good running back, even if Doug Martin's active. It's a total lottery ticket because we don't know for sure if he's even going to come back. He's not eligible until week 14. But this is another, if you are in your playoffs and just need someone who has some upside, Charles Sims' upside is higher than Rex Burkhead's or Capri Bibbs. He's worth a look. It's total boom or bust, and it might fail completely, but that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about players that we have no idea if they're going to play more than 30% of the snaps, so they're kind of just handcuffs. Nathan, have you watched any of the Bucks games? Like, because Doug Martin, he hasn't really done anything to excite me. So maybe there is something to this Charles Sims pick.
Oh, yeah, I think Doug Martin, he especially didn't do well this last week. He did look pretty good against Kansas City the week before. So I think Doug Martin, it's still his job. So Sims, he could very well see 30 to 40% of the snaps. I am a little bit concerned about how well Jacquizz Rodgers was playing before. So if Rodgers gets healthy as well, I could see that cutting into some of the time that Sims had been playing in the past. But I think Sims, he's a very good running back. We know that. So, and he's a receiving back. So he does have the high upside there, assuming he comes back.
Yeah, and they do play the Saints twice in Week 14 and Week 16, I believe. So they do
are much better than we give them credit for on defense, especially against the run. I just want to make sure I put that out there because we keep saying the Saints like it's the old Saints.
I've been saying that for a while now. The Saints, so my stat that I have on the Saints here is that they have not allowed any of their last 6 opponents to score more than 27 points. So they're not like a big, like allowing tons of points anymore. Because I remember last year it was like 30, 40 points every single game. So the Saints defense has gotten better. Sheldon Rankins coming back, that definitely helped provide a spark to the defense. But where we're going to spend a majority of our time today, I want to spend more time talking to each of you about the wide receivers. There's a lot of wide receivers we're going to go through today, and the number 1 pickup is Tyreek Hill. This is across the board. It's rare that all of us agree on a player to be the number 1 pickup at the position, but it's not even close this week, actually. Brandon, can you explain to me why Tyreek Hill is owned in just 27% of leagues?
No, I cannot explain that because it's ridiculous.
It really is.
I mean, I'm so glad that you have come onto the Tyreek Hill bandwagon, Michael.
Yeah.
Welcome.
It took me a while.
You with open arms. Hello.
Yeah.
Guy is dynamic, and it's something that the Kansas City Chiefs lack on offense in general, right? I mean, they're led by Alex Smith, Mr. Game Manager, Chuck Down Man, and you do you, Alex, you keep winning games, so I can't judge you. I just can statistically judge you for fantasy purposes, and that's a no-go. But as far as you winning games, congrats. But Tyreek Hill just offers them something completely different. To be entirely honest, it's exactly why I'm not quite sure Chuck West is ever going to get 18 touches if something were to happen to Spencer Ware, because they're doing a lot of gadget plays with Tyreek Hill. They're making him play in multiple different places in all these different formations. He's returning kicks. He's doing it all. So he's kind of one of those all-around players that you just can't ignore. Do I think he's going to have another 23.5 point game in standard scoring again this year? Maybe not.
Right.
To be entirely frank, I think this is the peak. And part of it's because they went up against a number 1 defense against the pass. And so they did all of these bizarre things. They literally pulled out every stop in their playbook to be able to get down the field, to be able to, get as many points as they did. I mean, who would have thought that one of the highest scoring games of the week would be Kansas City, Denver? Anyone? Raise your hand. No, there was no one who thought that. It was so crazy. So it was a fluke incident. But if you look back, actually, he's had 5 or more targets in every single game since week 8. And I know that there's a Jeremy Maclin injury in there that we're all trying to take into account. But Maclin was not impressive or effective prior to his injury in the way he had been in past seasons. So I don't know if he'd been injured a little more than we thought for an extended period of time, if it was just play calling. But Tyreek Hill's not going away. He's the most dynamic person on their team, on their offense. It's hurting Spencer Ware's numbers too, actually. But, fine. It is what it is. Grab him.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's where I'm at. And there's one league that I'm in, like I said. So I was trying to debate who to drop to pick up Tyreek Hill. And it's an industry league. So I think we all overlooked him at this point. So I have the most waiver wire budget of my free agent acquisition budget. And so Nathan and Daniel, I'm going to ask you guys, because I'm having trouble with this, because I'm going to make sure I get him. So I'm making sure I spend my funds, whatever. So I have to choose whether to start him this week against Atlanta, or do I start Mike Wallace versus his old team, Miami? Which way would you go, Nathan?
I'd go with Tyreek Hill.
Daniel?
I'd probably go Wallace.
You guys did not help me at all.
That didn't help at all.
It's Hill. I'm your tiebreaker. It's good. Versus Atlanta? Give me a break.
On a track, basically. That's basically what Atlanta is. It's a track.
Come on now.
I mean, when you went to Brandon, you asked her for if there were any reasons for doubting on Hill, and I have him number one, so I'm not saying a whole lot. But if you assume Macklin's coming back next week, not a safe assumption, but it's certainly possible. We haven't heard he's not. That is an offense that has Jeremy Maclin, Spencer Ware, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill, and Alex Smith throwing to him. There's not enough to go around. There's too many mouths to feed for Alex Smith to feed them. Hill's not playing a full complement of snaps. I like him. Like I said, he's still my number one on the list of waiver wire options we have here. But, man, this last week was his ceiling, and I don't see him coming close to that again.
Tyreek Hill was leading the Kansas City Chiefs with 4 touchdowns prior to Jeremy Maclin going out.
I understand that. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying they're going to give Maclin the ball some.
Yeah.
I think that, well, if you look at the targets, hold on a second. So Maclin might walk back in, but Albert Wilson has seen a big jump in targets because of Macklin's absence. So almost like those targets, and Travis Kelce on top of that. Travis Kelce coming into this year, he had just 2 games with more than 100 yards. Now 3 of his last 5 games have netted him over 100 yards. So he's definitely picked up volume because of that. Albert Wilson. So a lot of that stuff's been funneled in other places. So with Tyreek Hill playing almost 70% of the snaps the last 2 weeks, he's definitely a player that should be on everyone's radar. Like I said, I'm spending the rest of my fab to make sure I get him because I do have the most funds there. But let's stay on, with that type of player, that gadget player, the one that a lot of people didn't see coming this week, and that's Taylor Gabriel. Nathan, I'm going to talk to you because you have him highest. Now, I liked Gabriel this week. I thought he was a fantastic GPP play, and I said it on a few shows, so it's been out there. But I'm not a big fan of picking him up this week. I felt like last week it was more of just a matter of circumstance. But you have him at number 2, right behind Tyreek Hill. So let us know why you are so high on Gabriel.
Yeah, I'm picking him up. I might not be starting him this week, but he has been playing so well recently that he hasn't been seeing the targets, but he has 151 yards and 3 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks, despite not seeing that many targets. And he's playing so well that Atlanta has to give him more targets going forward. So I might wait a week to see and make sure that he starts seeing more targets going forward. But he's been playing too well not to. And Atlanta, they're in a situation where they're not definitely going to win the division anymore. So they have to be making sure they're winning these next few games. And I could see them passing a ton to do so. So I could see Gabriel having one of the highest upsides among the wide receivers that we're going to be talking about.
A fun fact, I just pulled it up just because I was like, I'm not crazy. I'm pretty sure. If you go back to the start of Week 8, when Week 8 games began, and even though Atlanta has a bye in between there, Taylor Gabriel is the number 6 fantasy wide receiver.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
He's averaging, in PPR leagues, he's averaging over, I think it's over 17 points per game.
That's insane. That's insane. Did you guys like how Atlanta trolled the Browns? Did you guys see that?
I did. Yeah. Sassy
that
pants.
was great.
Yeah, if you guys missed that, if you're listening, basically the Atlanta Falcons took a picture of Taylor Gabriel's Wikipedia page saying that he had been cut by the Browns earlier this year, and they said, thanks, Cleveland. It's a massive troll job. Like
we need more of that.
We do. It's so much fun. It's like the NFL might fine them for that, but so be it. We all got some laughs out of it.
No fun league.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But our number 2 consensus wide receiver is not Taylor Gabriel. It's actually Marquise Lee. Daniel, you are highest on Marquise Lee. So let's hear your explanation as to why you believe he's a pickup in front of someone like Taylor Gabriel.
I mean, I've given my Marquise Lee argument the last 3 shows I've been on. I will give it again. The only reason Marquise Lee hasn't been to Allen Hurns or even Allen Robinson in this offense for years now has been injury. He's healthy now. Last week, I made the very odd analogy that he scored a touchdown and it was like giving him a taste for human blood, but then he scored again this week. So I'm staying by my analogy. It's a great analogy. But he's had 6 or more targets in every game but one since week 1. He's had 50 or more yards, 5 of his last 7 games. There's no reason not to like this guy. He's not going to have the upside of the Taylor Gabriel we had just a minute ago, but he's going to give you a handful of catches every week. He's already ahead of Allen Hurns to me, and I think he's number 2 in an offense that, their running back is Denard Robinson. They don't have a lot of options right now.
Well, so Alan Hearns is hurt. He when he scored his touchdown, it looked like a pretty bad hamstring injury. It almost looked like AJ Green when he kind of healed over and just kind of like was grabbing it. Like you could tell something was wrong. It wasn't like just a slight limp. But Nathan and Brandon, I'm going to give you guys a chance to argue with Daniel here about why. Nathan, we'll start with you. Why do you think that Marquise Lee is not a great pickup?
I think he's an okay pickup. He has been consistently getting 4 catches each of the past 4 games. He does now have 2 touchdowns the last 2, but he also has been dropping a few more passes than he had been earlier in the year, or dropping each of the past 2 games. The last 3 games, he's topped out at 52 yards, so I'd want someone who can get a few more yards than that. I know he has 2 games with somewhat recently with more than 52 yards, but I think there are other wide receiver options who will get you more catches and has the potential to get you more yards as well.
Brandon, how about you? Do you have anything to add on top of that?
Schedule. It's a big issue.
Yes.
They're at home versus Denver, then they're at home versus Minnesota, then they're at Houston, and then they're at home versus Tennessee. If you have a Week 17 championship, I guess that Indy looks good. But other than that, those are all, top 10 defenses and makes me question.
Yes. No, Brandon, you couldn't have said it better. That's my concern with Marquise Lee. I actually said it was right before my last fantasy stock market that I did for PFF. It included Blake Bortles and Allen Robinson, basically saying get rid of them. If you were able to trade them before your league deadline closed, you should have done it because their schedule is awful. People don't even understand that. You almost don't want to start wide receivers, and even if it's a stud, you almost don't want to start him against Denver and Minnesota. And I would not say that Marquise Lee is a stud.
The only ones that do well are the gadget players like Tyreek Hill. When people get creative against Denver, you can score points. But if you're a straight up wide receiver 1, it's difficult. But hey, that used to be what we said about Seattle, and then Mike Evans proved us wrong. So anything's possible, but I don't know if Marquise Lee is possible. You know what I'm saying?
Seattle was missing 3 of their top parts of their pass defense: Michael Bennett, Deshaun Sheed, Earl Thomas. So they were missing big parts. So Mike Evans' game was a little bit, not as good as if they were full strength. Nathan, you have Anquan Bolden at number 3. You and Brandon are both high on Anquan Bolden this week. So give us a reasoning why Bolden is a good pickup.
He's been playing well recently. He's been being a bigger part of the offense recently. 8 targets in each of the last 2 games. He has a high catch rate as usual. So 13 catches over the last 2 games. And then outside of being a high target player recently, he's someone who's been catching touchdowns all season, 6 of them throughout the year, which is decent for a wide receiver that is available in plenty of leagues right now. So if he's going to continue to be a bigger part of the offense these last few weeks, I'd take a guy who's, 1, seeing a lot of targets, and 2, has that possibility for a touchdown.
My concern with Anquan Bolden is that he doesn't really carry much consistency. I know he's seen more targets the last couple weeks, but he has still yet to have a game this year with more than 69 yards. There's been just 2 games where he's totaled more than 48 yards. He's extremely touchdown dependent, though he has scored in 6 of 11 games this year. So they're heading into a potential shootout with the Saints this week. So I actually like him if you're looking for like a spot starter that you're looking for. You might be able to get 10 to 12 standard points out of him, maybe 15 in a PPR. I definitely think you could do worse. I think he's someone that someone might grab if you're looking for like an immediate starter. Right, Brandon? Is that where you're at with him?
He is playing better than both Marvin Jones and Golden Tate right now on a consistent basis.
He is playing better than Marvin Jones right now.
He is a more reliable fantasy option than the 2 quote-unquote top wide receivers on this team in terms of fantasy production. The schedule moving forward: at New Orleans, Chicago, at the Giants, and then at Dallas. They're going to have to throw in the 2 games that are against decent defenses, and they're going to have to throw at New Orleans as well. I just think that he is the guy that they target in the red zone, and their entire schedule moving forward is all about the pass. So I just think the touchdown upside is just too hard to ignore. You have way worse options on the waiver wire for sure.
Before we get into the biggest debate of the week on this show, because there's a big discrepancy between my ranking and theirs, and you guys know how that usually ends. They usually gang up on me and pick on me. But before we do that, let's get a word from our sponsors. Okay, guys. So now that we're back, it's time to pick on Mike. We should make this like a segment in the show, like pick on Mike segment.
No.
And you guys are all pretty high on Marquise Wilson. I'm not. I don't see the Bears passing. I think it was 58 times that they dropped back to pass against Tennessee this week. I think John Fox is going to try and get back to running the ball, and I think they're just going to run until they puke. It was just a weird game. The Tennessee Titans were awful. Like the Bears only scored 7 points in the first half, but I tweeted out at halftime. I said, I don't really care what the scoreboard says, 21-7. The Titans are playing extremely bad football right now. Like their defense was pathetic. They cut Parrish Cox after that game. I just don't think that Marquise Wilson is going to offer you any sort of consistency. And this week, I mean, like now that we're coming into the playoff weeks, I want consistency somewhat out of my players. I think, like, we obviously know his ceiling. He can offer you a good ceiling when they're throwing the ball 58 times. But I am not betting on Matt Barkley to have another good game. You guys need to talk me off the ledge here. Like, tell me why Marquise Wilson is a good pickup. Anybody grab it.
Well, he's only played in 2 games and he's had 15 targets. I mean, it's not exactly like, that's terrible. And on top of that, look at his schedule. San Francisco, at Detroit, Green Bay, Washington. And Washington's tough in week 16, but certainly as like a wide receiver 3 or a flex, at this point, you're not going to find someone with Marquise Lee's upside anywhere in your waiver wire other than Anquan Boldin and Tyreek Hill for some reason. But I just think that he is someone that you can actually have some hope for here. And I don't think you're right. There's no way they're going to have Matt Barkley, at least by design, throw it over 50 times per game. We're getting into wacko Aaron Rodgers territory with those kind of numbers. But, I think that when you look at everyone else on this list, he doesn't have a lot of competition either. It's not like Cameron Meredith's run away with anything. Eddie Royal is not at 100%, not even close. They don't really have a tight end. It's just him.
Yeah, that's a good argument, but so Daniel, I'm going to go to you in just a second because right after we talk about him, I'm going to talk to you about another player. But first, Nathan, give me your take on Marquise Wilson and why I should be higher on him than I am.
I think part of it's Chicago. Weeks ago, we could have said that they've had way too many injuries than what they deserve, but it still just keeps coming. I think Danny Trevathan most recently, I believe he's out for the year now, so the Bears just keep losing players, so even though they want to run the ball, they're going to need to pass the ball to try catching up late in games because teams are going to be able to score against Chicago's defense. So they're scoring. He probably won't see 11 targets again soon because they won't be passing that much. But because he saw such a high percentage of the targets, I could see that continuing going forward, and he did play well despite the drops. So I could see him seeing more playing time than what he was seeing these past 2 weeks. So I could see Chicago passing a ton and him seeing a lot of the target share. So I think that leads to a decent number of points.
That's fair enough. I'm more concerned about the quality of targets. And so basically, I was waiting to hold on to this because sometimes I like think in terms of actual talent in the NFL rather than fantasy and maybe just target shares and things like that, where I want quality targets over quantity. Daniel, you are exact opposite of me on this one. I have Marquise Wilson at 10 at wide receivers this week. I have Tyler Lockett at 2. You have Tyler Lockett at 10. You have Marquise Wilson at 4. So I'm wondering why you're so down on Tyler Lockett. The targets are up. Obviously, Russell Wilson had a bad game. So I'd like to understand this one.
Honestly, I was super high on Lockett entering the season. We did a Fantasy 101 back in July where we all got together and ranked the top 100 players. I was the only one that had Lockett over Doug Baldwin. But in the season now, he's given us nothing. He had 6 targets this past game and no receptions. He's gone over 40 yards once all season. He still doesn't have a touchdown. There's no upside here. It's all Baldwin, Jimmy Graham. What are you going to do with Lockett if you pick him up? You're going to start him this week? No. Or if he has, imagine he has 50 yards and a touchdown. That's not enough to inspire you to start him next week. So it's just a dead roster spot unless he has an amazing game this week and you think he can do that again. There's no upside here.
I'm actually okay if you wanted to start him and like over somebody like you grab, like let's say an Anquan Bolden. And the reason I say that is because if you're in a matchup where you need to win, where your team has been struggling a little bit, you're looking for upside, I think Tyler Lockett gives it to you. It's funny, we don't have access to these NFL Next Gen stats that they have, but Matt Harmon from NFL.com tweeted out that Doug Baldwin was number 2 this week in yards to separation per target. So when they're targeted, how many yards a defender is within them. Tyler Lockett was number 4 on that list. He's finally healthy. He is getting targets. This was just a weird game where Russell Wilson was off. Like, he couldn't complete a pass to his wide receivers. He was struggling. The offensive line wasn't blocking. It was just a bunch of problems. But for me, it's just one bad week for an offense. I'm not going to take too much from it. But seeing Lockett healthy and seeing him get more and more targets, he's going to have an explosion. And unless you believe that Jermaine Kearse is going to see, because if Russell Wilson gets on that fast track like he did last year, which he kind of looked like he had already started, he had one down game here. But if Russell Wilson's throwing 3 touchdowns a game, I think Tyler Lockett is a wide receiver 3. I
am very happy you think that. More power to you. Yeah, okay, I'll give you. Say this week was a down week. He had from weeks 3 through 9, whatever it is, 0 yards, 13 yards, 23, 13, 32, 17. Dude's doing nothing.
Well, if you look at that,
and yes, Wilson's getting better.
Wilson was hurt, and so was Lockett during the beginning of the season. Lockett was hurt all the way up through, I think, week 6.
Okay.
Brandon, Nathan, do you guys want to chime in and determine like who's going to win this argument?
I'll go ahead. I think he does offer the upside if you have that kind of roster spot, since we were talking about plenty of running backs that we're only stashing in case someone gets hurt. I think he's has the talent. We saw it last year. I know he hasn't done much recently. This was the first game in forever that he saw more snaps than Jermaine Kearse, which as someone who tweets out the snap counts each week and people complain each and every week that Lockett didn't have more snaps than Kearse, and this was finally a week that he did. I could see it happening where he could see a decent number of targets and finally start being the player we thought he was at the beginning of the season with the players healthy. So I think he offers more upside than some of the other players that we're going to be talking about now.
You see, that's where I'm at. Brandon, how about you? Oh, Brandon, you're muted.
Good. Well, good, because I was giggling the whole time over here. Listen, my biggest problem is his average depth per aimed throw is way high for Russell Wilson. He is a bomb down the field threat only, right? Last week alone, 26.3 was his ADOT. That's crazy. That was the 5th most highest in the league. And that was during a game in which everyone was having major issues, right? It was a disaster zone. And actually, if you look at the season as a whole, it's the same thing. So I just don't like how they're using him. They're using him as a boom or bust character, right? And he's yet to boom, unfortunately, right? His highest score was 9 points in a standard scoring league. So on the season, 34.5 points total this entire year. I'm not saying that there's not a possibility that there is like a big game in him, right? Because one of those bombs he has to catch and has to get into the end zone, right? But when am I going to feel confident enough in knowing when that game will come to put him in my starting lineup? That's kind of where I am with a lot of players right now. If you are never going to be confident starting someone, they shouldn't be on your bench then either. Like if you're saying that you would never put him in anyway, then you're just going to be ticked off the 1 week Tyler Lockett has a decent game and he's on your bench. I'd rather have someone as a handcuff, a legitimate handcuff, than have someone that I'm just going to be frustrated with no matter what the scenario is, right? You have to be in a very, very deep league at this point to start Tyler Lockett for upside based off of what we've seen historically from him. I guess that's how I feel.
So
I tell you, the way I would pick up Lockett, the only time I would do it is if I had Doug Baldwin and I'm treating him as a wide receiver handcuff. If I have Baldwin and he goes down, I think Lockett will be fine. That said, sure. Baldwin's missed 2 games his entire career, so it's not really betting on much. But outside of that, I'm not touching Lockett for nothing.
So it helps that he has. So I'm betting on a Russell Wilson breakout. Like, I'm betting on him to finish the season strong, obviously. And they're playing the Panthers this week without Luke Kuechly. Obviously, that's a different defense. The secondary hasn't been great all season. and they're playing against it was the Packers in week 14, and like the schedule it sets up pretty well for him. I think they play the Jets, I want to say, at some point in there. The Rams. So I don't know. I'm just betting on Russell Wilson, I think, more than anything, and I think Tyler Lockett is now starting to get healthy. I think he's seen 6 targets in 2 of the last 3 games, so I'm kind of betting on that. That's basically what it comes down to, I guess. So that was a fun argument. So Nathan, I want to talk to you because you are the lowest in the next player, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that are considering picking up this player, but they don't know what to do. And that is with Malcolm Mitchell. Malcolm Mitchell with the Patriots, obviously he caught 2 touchdowns he caught 2 touchdowns last week, 1 touchdown the week before. Everybody think this is a huge breakout for him. Why are we pumping the brakes a little bit? Like, why are you not so excited to pick him up?
Yeah, first off, he hasn't been seeing that many snaps. He's done well despite not seeing snaps, and I don't think his snaps are going to pick up. The Patriots both of their tight ends have been hurting. Ideally, both of them come back soon enough, and I think that the targets are going to go back to the tight ends once they're healthy. Julian Edelman will continue to see targets, so I don't think Mitchell will be on the field enough to see the targets to get you the fantasy points you want this year. I think he's a decent option going into future years. If you're in some sort of dynasty league or in a league where you can keep some players, then he's a good pickup, but I don't see a situation where you want to start him this year.
I actually agree with you on that one. Like Chris Hogan coming back, I wanted to look at the snap counts. Chris Hogan played almost all the snaps, so he's still the full-time player. Mitchell obviously just was in the right place at the right time this week with Gronk and Bennett out. So for me, I think I'd consider him if we find out that Bennett's going to miss time. If Gronk's going to miss time, that's when I would consider him. But let's go to Daniel. Daniel, you are the highest of us all on Quincy Enunwa. What's up with Quincy Enunwa? Do you see his performance from week 12 carrying forward?
I mean, this goes back to what I said about Ryan Fitzpatrick when we were talking quarterbacks. If Fitzpatrick's going to be marginally competent, and I think he is, there's only so many targets in that offense. And Enunwa, last I checked, and I think it's still true, has more fantasy points than Brandon Marshall on the season. I don't think he's going to be any phenomenal contributor, but when you're looking at a bunch of guys who, we're discussing whether Tyler Lockett's going to get 20 yards. We're discussing whether Malcolm Mitchell's going to even be part of the offense once you have the tight ends back and all that. And Enunwa was definitely a part of the offense. Even if he's not a superstar, he's going to get you 5 or 6 points a game. He scores a touchdown and get you 10 or 12 points a game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I actually agree with you on this one. We're not going to argue on Quincy Enunwa. He's just like that boring option. If you're looking for a high floor option that'll get you, maybe 8 to 12 PPR points a game, I think he's a solid fit. And then I think we talked about it. I think they're playing the Colts this week, so that's obviously a solid matchup for him in the slot against Darius Butler. So the last person I don't think we need to talk about is Brandon LaFell. I just thought it was kind of weird that he was only 23% owned while Tyler Boyd was 50%. So I think Brandon LaFell probably should be owned. I think he had 9 targets in this game. I'm not in love with Brandon LaFell, but if you're searching for a deep player to pick up, I guess you could do worse. So if you guys are looking for...
He had 6 targets, though, and Boyd had 8.
6?
Yeah.
I thought it was 9 for some reason.
According to us, it was 6.
Okay, there could be something different there, but yeah. Right. So he's just like
only 3 catches.
Yeah, I knew that. I knew that was pathetic. But yeah, Andy Dalton's not going to play very well without AJ Green. So our consensus ranking on the wide receivers, we have Tyreek Hill at number 1. We've talked about that. We have Marquise Lee at number 2, Taylor Gabriel as number 3, Anquan Bolden at number 4, Marquise Wilson at 5. Malcolm Mitchell at 6, Tyler Lockett at 7. Boo. And then after that,
yeah, boo, because that's way too high.
Then we have Quincy Enunwa, and we have Brandon LaFell. Oh man, I had fun in this show. I've had more fun. The more weeks we talk about waiver wire pickups and stuff, the more fun it is. But let's talk about tight ends before we get out of here, guys. We are not going to do this again. Brandon, do you want to give them a PSA just like to what to do at the tight end position?
I mean, grab CJ Fedorowicz yesterday.
Log off.
And yeah, that's really what you need to do. I don't know what we need to do, say, be to make you feel comfortable, not only to get him, but to start him, especially in PPR leagues. What's wrong with you? And then Vernon Davis is also an imperative must add. The Jordan Reed situation, it's always dicey every year. Let's just be honest. Let's be real with each other. Congratulations for all of us that started him on Thanksgiving. But Vernon Davis, you got to have him. If you have Jordan Reed, you should have already had him. But if someone left him out there, I would grab him if I had any other tight end. I'm dead serious. You go get him right now.
I'm in agreement. Yeah, so we all have CJ Fedorowicz as number one. We don't know why he's still just 35% owned. Nobody's listened. Maybe there's been 35% of you that have listened. But outside of that, the other 65 need to get out there and do it. Nathan, what do you think about Vernon Davis? Do you think he's a must-play tight end one? Because it seems like he's got a grade 3 separated shoulder. I have no idea how this guy caught a diving pass while having that. I just don't get it. But that's apparently the case.
Yeah, I think you definitely need to keep an eye out for Jordan Reed, see what his situation is. He keeps coming back and playing even when we think he won't play. But if he's inactive, then I think Vernon Davis definitely a must-play. He has 2.57 yards per route run this season, which is the best for all tight ends who have run over 170 routes. So, I think he's been playing very well, and he just needs to see the playing time. And if Jordan Reed's out, he will see the playing time.
Yeah, no, Vernon Davis has been really good, even with Jordan Reed on the field for a majority of these times. Like, he's actually totaled 50 or more yards in 6 of his last 9 games. So Vernon Davis has been a factor even with Jordan Reed on the field. This week, I'm concerned about it. Daniel, they're going to be playing the Cardinals. The Cardinals have yet to allow a touchdown to a tight end. They've also yet to allow a tight end, I think it's more than 53 yards. If you're a Reed owner, would you just probably stay away from the situation even if Reed plays? Like, how would you play it if you're a Reed owner and he suits up for this game, and if you're worried that maybe he's a decoy?
I mean, unless you have some star backup. If Jordan Reed plays, you're playing Jordan Reed. You dance with the ones that brung you in, see what happens. If Reed's out and it's Vernon Davis, it's really going to depend on my options. But honestly, I'm still probably going to use him even against the Cardinals. I know the Cardinals are superstars against the tight end, but the Washington has shown that they're going to go to their tight end no matter what, and I'm going to trust in that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, like, I think that honestly that the Redskins would be doing fantasy owners a favor by benching Jordan Reed this week, like that they just don't play him, because honestly, it's not a matchup that I'd want. And I'd worry about like a Gronk type scenario where, people felt necessary to play Gronk, and I told them to. I said, if you have Gronk, you have to play him. And then he comes away with no points, re-injures himself. I know it's a new injury. They're saying this is a back, but at the same time, honestly, against the Cardinals, I would not want to mess with it. I just hope to avoid it altogether. Another option.
I think he's completely different though than Gronk, because Gronk we've seen all season where they put him in as a decoy, and they've never resisted that. Whereas when Jordan Reed's played when we thought he's hurt, he's been a stud every time. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's a little apples and oranges for me on that, but it's interesting that you say that comparison. But when I look back at their game log, Rob Gronkowski, that's a whole nother show.
Yeah, they have used him as a decoy, like when he was first getting reacclimated back into the game. But like I said, if it wasn't such a tough matchup, I'd feel better. But like I said, the Cardinals just don't allow anything to tight ends. They just really don't. One tight end that actually just got done playing them, and it's kind of funny. He turns out as number 3 on our consensus rankings. And I thought you guys were going to put him last. I thought I was the only person that semi-liked him. And that's Austin Hooper. I don't know. Daniel, you have him at number 5. Nathan, you have him at 6. So, Nathan, what's your concern? All right, no, you have him at 5.
No, I've got Hooper at 3.
Oh, that's right. Nathan, you have him at 5. So what's your concern about Hooper here? Do you think is it matchup concern? Is it, what is it with him that you don't like?
It's his playing time and how he's been playing recently. Levine Toilolo has been playing too high of a percentage of the snaps at tight end. He's been seeing a decent number of pass routes as well. So Hooper hasn't been playing all of the passing snaps at tight end for them. His targets have been in decline in recent weeks, even though Jacob Tamme is out, just 8 yards in each of the last 2 games. So he really hasn't been doing much recently.
Yeah, that's the only concern I have for him, is that he was playing extremely well, and then he had a drop in week 9. He had 2 drops in week 10, and then all of a sudden they come back from their bye, and he played just 47% of the snaps. Brandon, is there any way you could talk me off the ledge with Austin Hooper?
Well, I think he had a bad game at Philadelphia before the bye. You're right. And then he came back, and again, they were facing the Arizona Cardinals, who don't give up any points to tight ends. So they just said, well, why? Why would we even? I mean, I think the game script was so that Hooper wasn't going to be involved. I wouldn't have played him last week anyway. So I don't know if we can really read much into that. The only thing is that Kansas City and the Rams are pretty good against the tight end as well.
Yes.
It gets a lot better, though, against San Francisco and at Carolina. So, I mean, I think that he'll still be available the following week. I don't know if I'd want to start him this week. But for me, I just didn't like the other options more.
Well, it's funny. I was actually just about to say that. I was about to say this week you're probably not going to want to start them. They're playing Kansas City. Kansas City is the defense that was number 1 against tight ends last year. They are number 3 against tight ends this year. So they're definitely, Eric Berry typically shadows the tight ends. So stay away from Austin Hooper this week. He might be on our show next week as an interesting pickup going forward into the fantasy playoffs if you're looking for a deep ad. Nathan, you have Ladarius Green at number 3. You are the highest on him. Was there something that you saw in Thanksgiving game? I know he caught 2 long balls, but is there something you liked about him? Because I know his snap counts have been pretty low.
Oh, yeah, his snap counts only increased slightly this past week, but he did have those 2 nice catches, 35 yards, 32 yards. Out of these other tight ends we're talking about outside of Fedorowicz and Davis, Kendricks only has 1 catch of more than 30 yards. Jared Cook only 1, Hooper only 2, and that's over the course of an entire season. We're talking Green did this in 1 game. 3.46 yards per route run on the season, which is the best for any tight end on an active roster right now. So it's not like Jesse James has been playing well recently. He also, his longest catch is 24 yards over his NFL career. So I could still see an opportunity for Green to see a lot more playing time going forward. And if that happens, I think he's a decent start.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting because they are missing that kind of deep threat because, Marcus Wheaton, obviously he's out for the year. Sammy Coates hasn't lived up to anything at this point. He's dropping passes more than anybody else in the league. Daniel, the last tight end I want to hit on is just Lance Kendricks. I have him at number 3. I was the highest on him. I'm not excited about playing Lance Kendricks, but he seems like he's been a solid floor type play. Do you have any take on Lance Kendricks?
He's Lance Kendricks. He continues to be Lance Kendricks. He will always be Lance Kendricks. If you're in an absolute bind, you want to pick up Lance Kendricks, more power to you. Woo!
Brandon, do you have anything to add on Lance Kendricks before we get out of here?
Well, he's one of those players that I was talking about, right? And this is a strategy call on my part, and everyone's a little bit different. I'm not quite sure I'm ever going to feel confident starting Lance Kendricks, so I don't need him on my bench. I just, at this point of the season, in week 13, I'd rather have people that like Alfred Morris or what have you, that if something were to happen, I'd insert with confidence, right? So this is just more of a strategy thing for me. I just don't know if I'm ever going to, and for me, like Ladarius Green, I would never have the confidence to start him. I mean, there's no way. So that's kind of how my ranking went down, is that who here would I actually play? Because none of them are handcuffs. None of them are getting in the situation other than Vernon Davis. So that's kind of how I feel about it. But yeah, you can't ignore that, since their bye, he had 1 game of 90 yards and another game where he scored a touchdown. But then he had 2 games of less than 2 points. So
yeah, there's definitely concern about his floor there, even though I will say this. He's had at least 5 targets in 5 of his last 6 games, which is always a plus for a tight end. It's rare to find that nowadays. So sure. I think you could definitely do worse than Lance Kendricks. I would start him. Honestly, I'd start him over maybe Vernon Davis this week. I'm just not a big fan of the matchup for the Redskins against the Cardinals tight ends, whereas Lance Kendricks is going to go up against New England in a game where they're going to have to pass a lot more than they're used to. Todd Gurley's not going to be able to rack up 20 carries in this game against the Patriots. So, that wraps up this show, guys. This was a fun one. We argued more than usual. We had some different takes. Let's go run through everybody and give your Twitter handles. Brandon, you want to go ahead and let them know where they can find you on Twitter?
Sure. You can follow me at Brandon, her FFB, as in her fantasy football.
Daniel?
I'm at Daniel T. Kelley, and that's Kelley with an EY.
I also think you could find him at Tyler Lockett Hater. And then Nathan, where can they find you?
At PFF_Nate Jahnke. That's PFF_NATEJAHNKE.
And you can find me at Tyler Lockett Lover. Also at Mike Tagliere NFL. Guys, this wraps up this episode. We had a blast, and we are going to be back here next week, week 14, for the start of the fantasy football playoffs. It's going to be a good time. Come hang out. Until next time, lights out.